Okay, Chairman, we're live on YouTube.
Thank you very much. Is everybody in the room? Okay. Right, well, welcome everybody to this third virtual meeting of the Western Area Planning Committee. My name is David Beeman and I'm chairman of this committee. I'm supported this evening by a number of officers, they being Zach Elwood, the head of planning and economic development, Lewis Jones, the planning lawyer, Chris French, an area planning team leader, Philippa Stadden, senior planning officer, Ruth Dovey, planning officer, Kimberly Sohn, who's Democratic Service Officer, who's clerking for this meeting. Members and officers, please use the hand raise function within Zoom to indicate that you wish to speak, and you'll be able to speak in turn. Please keep yourself on mute when you're not speaking. Please, can I also ask that any questions get brief and to the point? We'll be timing speeches this evening, and an alarm will sound when you've been speaking for 4 minutes. If any members of the meeting lose the connection temporarily, we will pause to allow them time to rejoin the meeting. If the webcast stream fails, then we will also have to adjourn until we are able to reset the connection. And before we start, if anybody wishes to remove jackets, please feel free to do so. Okay. Right. Okay. Agenda item 1. Okay. You note the minutes of the meeting on the 7th of July, which are published on the council website. Are they okay? Everybody in agreement? Yes. Yes.
There appears to be agreement, Chair.
Yeah, I've got a weak internet connection tonight. Hold on. Right, okay. 2. And again, apologies for absence and substitutes. Kim, are there any apologies received?
We have apologies from councillors Adams, Hess, Deer and Mirrlees, and we have substitutes of councillors Blishin, Hyman and James.
Yes, and well, but I don't think Councillor Deer is able to make it tonight, is he, Kimberly?
No, Adams, Hess, Deer and Mirrlees, Chair.
Okay, fine. Questions from members of the public? Any questions received from members of the public?
None submitted, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions from members? Any questions from members?
None submitted, Chairman.
Okay, very good. Agenda item 6. Are there any relevant updates to government guidance or legislation? Chris French, to give us any updates?
Can I pick that up? Can I pick that up, Chairman? Yes. So the Business and Planning Bill is going through its final stages in the Lords and is due to be enacted next week, we believe, by towards the end of next week. This covers things like the pavement licenses for outdoor seating areas for restaurants and cafes, etc. It also covers the deemed consent route. It brings into law the deemed consent route for extensions to construction hours of properties and also, of developments. And also today, new law has been laid in Parliament, will come into effect in September, effectively changing the permitted development rights to enable full planning applications not to be required to demolish and rebuild unused buildings as homes. Repurposing commercial and retail properties will be allowed, and the sort of one that's been mooted for some while, which is that homeowners will be able to add up to 2 additional stories to their homes to create more living space or indeed new homes. There'd be a fast track approval process for that, but we'd have to consider impact on neighbours and the appearance of the extension. So I imagine it will be an extension to the prior approval process, but we need to see the full details. But we'll give members more details in due course, but that's not very far away. That's September. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. I will not comment. Right, so we'll move on really to item 7, which is mainly the application. The main, well, here tonight is the application to planning permission. Please note we've got the polling features we've had in previous weeks within Zoom set up so that polling system. So can we start with First of all, applications decided on delegated powers. Who's going to fill us in on that one?
Chairman, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I missed the first half of that, and I'm not sure what you said. Did anybody else? You were sort of like
Yeah,
singing.
The connection was pretty bad, I think, for the first half of what you were saying.
Would you repeat? Would you repeat what you said? I apologise. Thank you.
Right. No. I'm going to take the video off because that'll help, I think. Okay, right. I said that we now enter the main part of the agenda, which is application for planning permission. Please note the polling feature within Zoom has been set up so that votes on the following items can be taken by general assent or by using the polling system. If a recorded vote is required, this will be done by roll call. Okay. Right. Next one, applications decided under delegated powers. Who's going to deal with this, please? There we are.
And there's been one since the last agenda, Chairman. Thank you.
None. Okay. Right, we move on to the main items then. Applications, the first one being subject to public speaking. This is WA 2020-20056, land at Four Seasons, Uplands Road, Farnham, erection of extension and alterations. And Philippa Stanton is going to present and make the presentation. Yes?
That's right, Chair. I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully you can all see that. So good evening, members. First item on the agenda today is Four Seasons, Uplands Road, Farnham, which is an application for the erection of an extension and alterations as amended by plans received and a statement that was received. So apologies, the location plan's a little bit unclear, but hopefully you can make out the application site. So Four Seasons is a detached two-storey dwelling located to the southeast of Uplands Road, which is an unmade private cul-de-sac. Here on the aerial view, we can see the existing conservatory, which would be demolished as part of this proposal here, and the large terrace area at Highbury, which is the closest neighbouring property to the application. This slide shows the original submission, which officers were not satisfied was acceptable, and asked the applicant to amend the plans. The key difference being, which we'll come on to this in due course, but the key difference being that the two-storey element of the proposal has been reduced from 5 metres in depth to 3 metres in depth, and this balcony and side-facing first floor window have been removed from the proposal entirely. And here we just see the original floor plan, so you can see the full 5 metre depth of the proposal, which, as I say, has been reduced, and we'll come on to in a moment. So the proposal now is a part two-storey, part single-storey extension to the rear of the property. The first floor element of the proposal would be 3 metres deep, and the single-storey element would be 5 metres deep. The first floor element of the proposal would be 2 metres from the boundary with Highbury. And there's also a number of fenestration alterations that are proposed. So moving on to some photographs of the application site, and I've provided a photo per slide, so hopefully they're a bit clearer for you to see on your screens. So photograph A is the existing rear elevation of Four Seasons, which shows the existing conservatory, which would be demolished as part of this proposal. Photograph B is taken from the garden or terraced area of Highbury, the neighbouring property, and hopefully you can see my mouse. The first floor extension would come off here. So that's looking directly at the application site from the neighbouring property. This is also taken from Highbury, a bit further back on the terrace. So the extension would come out here. And a similar shot, but further down the garden at Highbury. So you can see that the terraced area to the rear of Highbury is at a much higher level than their garden here. and you can see a substantial hedge that forms the boundary between the two properties. So both similar sort of views here, but photographs E and F show the extent of terracing to the rear of Highbury, and again the position of that in relation to the application site here. And this in detail just shows the rear terraced area of Highbury. This photograph is taken from Friars Way, which is the property on the other side of the application site, which shows that the proposal would be well separated from Friars Way. And a bit clearer here is the rear of Friars Way, and you can see the application site here. So moving on to proposed elevations, the front elevation would not be altered as part of this proposal, but I've just shown it there so you can see. This is the elevation that faces Friars Way, and we can see that the previously proposed balcony and door have been removed and have been replaced by a high level window, which would ensure that there was no overlooking or loss of privacy to the occupiers at Friars Way. This is the rear elevation, again a little bit blurry, but here we can see the two-storey extension and the single-storey extension. You'll note from the officer report that a condition has been recommended ensuring that the flat roof element of the single-storey extension could not be used as a balcony. Therefore, no concerns are raised regarding overlooking or loss of privacy to the neighbours. And here we see the side elevation, which would face Highbury, and we see the 3 metre extension at first floor and a 5 metre extension at ground floor. And here on the floor plans, we can see on the ground floor plan, the 5 metre extension, and at first floor, the 3 metre extension here. So the main matters for consideration here are the impact on visual amenity and the design. So the proposed extension is orientated to the rear of the property, and it would not be highly visible from the public realm or from the street scene. So the applicant has put forward a case that the 2-storey element of the proposal would be lawful under permitted development, and officers consider this to be the case, as the property's permitted development rights are still intact. And whilst it is correct to say that the single-storey element of the proposal would not be permitted development, this is not an area of concern for officers. Therefore, it's considered that the PD fallback position presented by the applicant is a material consideration that officers have given weight to, and it will be for members to decide if you're in agreement that the fallback position that could be developed under permitted development is sufficient in this case. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Philippa. Right, we have 3 public speakers on this. The first one, and each of you will have 4 minutes. You'll be 10 4 minutes. The first speaker is Jamie Stewart, WS Design, on behalf of the neighbours, who's an objector. Mr. Stewart, I should say.
Thank you very much. I'm hoping you can all hear me. Good evening, my name's Jamie Stewart. I'm Director of WS Design in Hazelmere, and I've been employed by Mr. and Mrs. Pusey of Highbury, Uplands Road, to object to the application set out in front of us. It's important to note that as a director of an architectural design and planning company, I'm usually quite supportive of development applications. However, on this occasion, I have visited the site and feel that the extensions proposed are overbearing, bulky, and have a significant detrimental impact on my clients. Highbury sits directly to the northeast of Four Seasons. I'm just going to turn my screen around so that it shows some pictures on there. Hopefully you can see that okay. Where was I? Sorry, Highbury sits directly to the northeast of Four Seasons, as seen in this image. And you can see that Four Seasons already projects beyond the rear building line of the of Highbury, so basically it protrudes out further. What can't be seen from this image is that Four Seasons is already built significantly higher than Highbury, and that can be seen in these images as I scroll through them here. Image 4 here also shows the position of the sun in early April at 1 p.m, clearly showing that, that the impact an extension will have on Highbury coming across here will be quite immense to Highbury's space. There are too many points to raise in the 4 minutes I have, so I would respectfully request that the committee members read our objection letter dated 17th of April before determining the application. However, the main thrust of the objection is as follows. The proposal is not subordinate to the main dwelling, and in fact, the proposal was amended as such. The first elevation shows a subservient roof. The second elevation, which is being proposed in front, is actually significantly higher. So in fact, the bulk of the property has been increased since the Ms. Stadden requested a reduction. There's been no drawings submitted demonstrating compliance with the 45-degree and 25-degree tests usually applied to householder applications. Indeed, by simply adding a 45-degree angle to the ground floor extension and the first floor extension, it significantly affects the light and will be detrimental to our clients' amenity space. The applicant is seeking to use a permitted development fallback position without the permitted development actually being built out. We do recognise that a 3-metre 2-storey extension or a 4-metre single-storey extension could be built under permitted development, but the applicant seeks 5 metres on the ground floor, and this in turn will also impact on our client, given that Highbury is significantly lower in stature to Four Seasons. As far as I see it, you can't use a PD fallback for the first floor and ignore the ground floor, which is proposed outside of permitted development. And in any case, the application in front is a full householder application that does not meet the guidelines set out in the local and national framework or the Waverley Supplemental Plan, and should be determined within these guidelines and policies. There are numerous objections to the proposal, and given the negative feeling towards the proposal, I respectfully request that the committee votes to refuse the application on the grounds that the proposal is too bulky and creates significant detrimental impact on Highbury. It is excessive in depth and height, and will lead to a significant loss of light to Highbury and their windows and amenity space. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Stewart. Second speaker is in support of the application, Nick Griffin, who is the MD of Inception Planning. Mr. Griffin.
Thank you, thank you, Chairman, and good evening. Yes, as just stated, my name is Nick Griffin, and I'm the Managing Director of Inception Planning Limited. I'm a chartered town planner with over 20 years of experience, and I've been asked by the applicants for this application to address the committee. I would like to start by thanking you for the opportunity to do so. We note that your officers have provided you with a full assessment of the planning issues raised by the development in the report to this committee, and that this report concludes that the development is in accordance with policies of your council's development plan, as well as national planning policy. The report also identifies the existence of a fallback position, as you've already heard. And this fallback position for my clients is namely the ability to erect a 2-storey rear extension, which would be the same size of the 2-storey element proposed by this application. Your officers agree that this fallback position is valid and represents a material consideration that not only needs to be taken into account, but also justifies the development. We fully support and agree with the conclusions and findings of the committee report, in particular that the proposed development is in accordance with design-related policies of your development plan. This is by virtue of the fact that Uplands Road features large detached dwellings with a variety of designs and materials set back from the road. Whilst the proposed extension would increase the scale and bulk of the dwelling, owing to its orientation to the rear of the property, it would not be highly visible from the public realm and would not appear unduly prominent in the street scene. and further, the proposed materials are also considered to be acceptable. The development would not harm the amenities of neighbouring properties. Again, this is as set out in the report, because there's an established fallback position, which is again where a 2-storey extension with a depth of 3 metres that is sited 2 metres from the boundary of the neighbouring property, Highbury, could be constructed by virtue of the Town and Country Planning General Permitted Development Order. The fallback position can be built without the need for a formal plan application. As a result, the proposed development would not be materially more harmful than what could be achieved without a formal plan application. Whilst the single-storey element of the proposals would not form part of the established fallback position, it is accepted that it does not result in material harm to the neighbouring properties by way of being overbearing development or loss of light or loss of outlook. Overall, no loss of light of neighbours' property would occur to justify refusal of the development, and no overlooking of neighbours' property as a result of the development would occur to justify refusal. We would like to highlight that during the course of the application, my clients have sought to work with your planning officers to address the issues that have been raised. As a result, the size of the extension has been reduced in depth to reduce its impact on neighbouring properties. Whilst there remains a small number of objections, which includes rather strangely objections from an address that's not in the vicinity of the development, we note that the officer's report has fully assessed the objections that are valid material considerations. In doing so, it does not consider them to be objections or issues that would mean the development is contrary to policies of your council's development plan. Therefore, for these reasons, and in the absence of other material considerations to the contrary, we would respectfully request that planning permission is granted for this development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Griffin. And now we have the Ward Councillor, Councillor Andy MacLeod, who wishes to speak to the committee, and of course he has the right to also sum up at the end. Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you very much, Chairman. As you say, Chairman, I'm speaking as a local member who, together with my colleague, Councillor Martin, agreed to call this application into the committee. I was invited by the neighbours, Mr. and Mrs. Pusey, who's Mr. Stewart spoke on behalf of, to come round and look at the situation on the ground last Thursday. And I visited the property and looked at it from the patio area. And it did strike me that this extension would be overbearing and over bulky. And that's also the opinion of the Town Council, who regard it as being contrary to policy FNP 16 of the neighbourhood plan. So that's the first issue I wish to address. The second issue I wish to address is this issue of permitted development. It's quite tricky to understand what's going on here, actually. It is true that the officers assure us that the applicant could build a 2-storey, 3 metre extension. That is true, provided it's 2 metres away from the boundary. That is actually slightly disputed by the neighbours, but let's just assume for the moment that's correct. They could do that under permitted development, but they're not planning to do that. They've made a planning application to build that, but also with a 5 metre extension underneath. Now, the thing about permitted development is that it's generally quite generous to householders, and it's the maximum, if you like, of what should be permitted. A 2-storey extension of 3 metres with 5 metres underneath isn't permitted development. And therefore, the people who drew up the rules for permitted development didn't regard that that's something that should be permitted. So my argument is that it's pretty unfair for it to be done this way. They have applied under the normal planning, Waverley planning rules, if you like, and it doesn't meet them either, because the single-storey extension would not be 3 metres from the border of the property, which it should be to meet Waverley's rules. So it seems to me this is actually trying to use and almost, I don't, perhaps abuse is too strong a word, but manipulate permitted development to try get an application through that wouldn't be allowed under normal rules. So it's just not the thing that I'm at all comfortable with. And I would recommend the committee to refuse this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Right, councillors, your turn. Who wishes to speak first? No hands yet. No. Nobody? Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you, Chair. I've got some questions, having read through the papers. The first question is, why haven't the climate change conditions been considered under the local plan part 1? The second question is, as far as I'm aware, under permitted development and under the local plan, the materials must be similar. So this, on the basis that the proposed materials are considered to be acceptable, I'm not sure where that is coming from. The third question is about light pollution. There seems to be an exceptional amount of glass on this development. And then there's the concern for a boundary hedging is not protected and cannot be relied on. I think we really need to be careful that the boundary hedging is destroyed or impaired in any way. So if those questions on light pollution and climate change issues could be answered, that would be very helpful.
Thank you very much. Do the officers wish to answer those questions now, or shall we? Yes, officers? Philippa?
Thank you, Chair. So with regard to conditions that are recommended to be attached to planning permissions, they need to be reasonable and appropriate to the development that's being proposed. I imagine that Councillor Edmonds is referring to the water and electric vehicle conditions that are often attached to new dwellings or replacement dwellings. But it wouldn't be reasonable to expect an applicant who is constructing an extension to provide to alter the water usage in the house or provide electric vehicle charging points for a development of that sort of this nature. In terms of light pollution, sort of the rear windows are replacing existing rear windows, and actually this proposal would replace a rear conservatory which would feature a lot more glass than is being proposed by the proposal. I think officers have considered the materials and we do consider them to be acceptable in relation to the character of the dwelling and the surrounding area. And what I was referring to with regard to the hedging is it isn't protected in terms of how a tree might be protected under with a tree preservation order. You cannot rely on hedging in perpetuity as it might become damaged for a number of reasons, ill health, etc. So that is what I meant. Hope that is helpful.
So sorry, sorry, Chair, just one thing. I mean, some of these are arbitrary decisions. As regards to the materials, I think it's absolutely essential that we have certainty in terms of use of materials. Otherwise, we're really going to be getting into a mess, and planning decisions are going to involve significant uncertainty. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I've got Councillor Hyman, Councillor Coburn, and Councillor Dixon. Councillor Hyman?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This is a difficult one, but of course the applicant has got the right to test us and test our policies if they wish to, and they do have their fallback situation, which I know there is some doubt about, but I think I accept the officer's case that they would be able to construct it. The issue really is whether we know from page 12 of our committee papers, it's about the sixth-ish paragraph that says it breaches the 3-metre rule that we have in our residential extensions SPD, and we know from the third paragraph of page 13 that it breaches the 45-degree rule. And I think, you know, notwithstanding the fact that they can use other avenues in order to be able to construct something, we have to abide by our policy unless we've got very good reasons to do otherwise. And from what I've heard, I'm not convinced that there are very good reasons to do otherwise. if this went to appeal, because of course that's you know, where this sort of application very often ends up, then we would, I imagine, face an inspector who would be asking the question as to whether we were unreasonable or not to ignore our SBD and our 45-degree rule. And I don't think it could be considered unreasonable. So I don't think we could have, we're at risk of having costs awarded against us if we were to refuse it and an inspector found the other way. It's very much a matter of opinion. You know, so on that basis, I myself, I think, you know, on the basis I think it's reasonable and expected, and I think the neighbours can expect us to stand by our policy and act in accordance with it, unless there's very good reason to differ from it, then or depart from it, which I don't have. I would need to be able to put those reasons into writing, and I can't do that. So I am minded, unless I hear something which convinces me otherwise, I am minded to follow the opinion of Councillor MacLeod and refuse this development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Coburn, then Councillor Dixon, then Councillor James. Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm a bit like Councillor Hyman. I think this is very much on balance. And I do think we've got to support our own policies. We go to a lot of trouble and time to write them. And then so often we come in and we say, well, it doesn't actually comply, but on this occasion. And as we all know, that leads to a slightly bigger breach on the next occasion, a slightly bigger one. And, you know, all of a sudden you've got a coach and horses through a policy that's meant to, you know, protect neighbours' amenity. It's a difficult, like most places in this area, you know, the heights and the topography of the land always make extensions difficult. But I also, I'm very uneasy about having things that are not exactly right, but because people can't see them in the street scene, it's okay. I always feel it's a bit like giving me permission to murder my husband, but as long as nobody actually sees me do it, you know, if it's wrong, it's wrong. And it's wrong whether it's at the front, whether it's at the back, you know. So I have to say, I don't think this complies with our own policies here. I don't think it complies with policy FMP 16 of the newly made neighbourhood plan. I think it's on balance, and I think that there is an extension that can be built on this property. But I do think the sort of consideration seems to have gone out of planning in a way that it used to be. I remember close to here, there was a small bungalow people wanted to build in the plot next door, and they built chalet bungalows to not overlook the big one. Then, sorry, the little one. Then the little one came into wanting to be a bigger house. And again, they looked at the properties that had been built next to them, and they came in with something that sort of fitted in nicely. We seem to have rather lost that. We seem to go for the maximum, push the boundaries, and see whether or not we can actually get away with it. I think this will have a harmful effect on neighbouring properties, too harmful. I don't think it fits in with FMP 16 on 2 or 3 counts. And so I'm finding it very, very hard to support this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dixon, then followed by Councillor James and Councillor Rubini. Councillor Dixon.
Yes, I'm going to start with a question which perhaps Philippa can answer. When you showed us the photographs, we saw that there was a very high hedge. And I was wondering who that hedge belonged to. I know this sounds, because it is already a very, very high hedge. And yes, the house can be seen above it, but there seems to be a lot of privacy between these 3 properties already. And all 3 properties are very vast, and they have extremely large gardens. And I think what depresses me the most about this is that these are older houses which, you know, are not modern, and yet they are very, very, very desirable properties. I do find it really that we're all sitting here talking about it, and we've got 2 professional architects who are making the case, and I'm just really really disturbed that these people couldn't have made an agreement between themselves. Obviously, we need to follow our own policies, but in general, if the extension is at the back of the house and it's not ruining the street scene, then if it fits within our policies, then I would be in favour of it. But can someone, how it is, perhaps you could just explain to us who the hedge belongs to, and then we can know whether or not the neighbour that's losing their lice could actually reduce or increase that hedge.
Philippa, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Dixon. I don't know who owns the hedge, I'm afraid.
Okay, right. Councillor James and Councillor Rubini and then Councillor Clark. So Councillor James.
Thank you, Chairman. It's quite rare that I don't support the officers, but on this occasion, I think it is overbearing. We have policies which we should adhere to, unless there are unbelievably different circumstances that we need to apply to that application. Permitted development rights, as officers know, are the bane of my life. In most of all the new applications for housing estates, most of the permitted development rights have been removed. I usually add a few of my own, as you know. If we've got permitted development rights, then they can build what they are allowed to under permitted development rights. This literally goes beyond it, higher than, wider than, longer than. And the one thing that slightly concerns me is that the officer said they were removing the window and the balcony from the side, but it has a flat roof extension. And if officers wanted to look at the window that overlooks the back garden, surprisingly, it's a French window with side windows. Why would you want to put in French windows opening onto a flat roof when you're not going to be allowed to use it? So that does concern me. If members allow this application, I would be inclined to remove those French windows, so to say they are non-opening windows. And if they're opening, to put one of those little metal railings so the doors have to open inwards and you can't look out, look left or right, overlooking the neighbours. But on this occasion, I do think it is overbearing. And I probably, unless somebody comes up with some magical answer, I don't think I will be supporting the officers. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor James. Councillor Rubini, who is the vice chair of this committee, I forgot to introduce him at the beginning.
It's Councillor Keane that would like to speak.
Oh, right, okay.
Sorry, we're sharing the screen.
Yeah, okay.
Like some of the other speakers, I am concerned that the bulk and mass of this building, of this extension, my second concern is the hedge, because if nobody knows who owns that hedge, and it was decided to take it down, it would be absolutely awful for the neighbours, because they would have no privacy whatsoever. So I am concerned about this, and at the moment I feel that I couldn't support it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rubini, do you want to add anything? No. Councillor Clark, then Councillor Isherwood. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a few points. I do think it's disingenuous to try and use two sets of regulations for one extension, and saying on the one hand the two-story part's all right, but the one-story, well, what happens if we only build the two-story part? Does it fall down? It's just strange, and I know it's a matter of opinion. I don't think it's right. I think the applicant has shot themselves in the foot by making the roof line higher. I don't see why they would want to do that, but they have. And I would echo Councillor Keane's point about the hedge. It doesn't look particularly healthy. It's probably only got 5 to 10 years of life left in it. And the 45-degree angle is going to be exacerbated if that hedge is removed. So I don't think I'd be inclined to support this application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, looking at this application, it's gone through many changes. It should really have been completed in the 8 weeks prior to lockdown, in my view. Obviously, the officers have been trying to negotiate changes to the design and all the way through. We've seen this. And I look at the file with the letters of objection, and there aren't many support, but I do have very strong views about the 3-meter rule and the SPD. That is something that if we ignore on this occasion will be overridden again in the future. Councillor Hannah James made the point about the French windows, and that to me just doesn't fit with what we've got here. Likewise, the 45-degree problem is there. Loss of amenity is certainly something that I can see. And we're looking at the hedge. I mean, interestingly, no one's gone for the high hedge consideration. It strikes me that it's well over 2 meters, but I didn't measure that in any way. I did visit the site, have a look from the road, so I've got a fair idea, but I feel that the 3-meter rule in particular and the loss of amenity to the neighbour is where I'm having problems. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Neil.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I find myself a little bit conflicted on this one, pros and cons. I would generally want to support an application like this. It's on, you know, quite spacious ground, individual buildings, etc. But I think at the end of the day, they're pushing too many boundaries on our regulations and policies and that sort of thing, which I think we should try and uphold. So I've swayed towards the rejection side from my point of view. Thank you.
Yeah, I have no more hands. Councillor MacLeod, do you want to sum up? You have an opportunity to sum up.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I would like to say brief things. Firstly, when I went round, I did ask the neighbours who owned the hedge actually, and they told me it's owned by the applicant. They were concerned about the hedge actually because they felt that the shade that the extension would cast over the hedge would actually cause it to die reasonably soon. I don't know whether that's true or not. It does at the moment provide very good screening. It's a very high hedge, and they were concerned that the extension wouldn't help the hedge at all. So I can tell you, at least they told me that the neighbours, the applicant owns the hedge. In terms of the application, I think it's fairly simple actually. That this application cannot be built under permitted development. It falls outside permitted development, so it can't be built that way. It can't be built under our own rules and regulations, and it's against FNP 16, so we shouldn't be approving it that way either. So I think the applicant's got a couple of choices. They could actually build a 2-meter extension to two stories under permitted development, and if they want to do that, they should go ahead and do it. But they shouldn't. That doesn't mean they should be allowed later to extend the ground level to 5 meters, because that would be against our planning rules. So I think they're faced with either doing what they're allowed to do under permitted development, or looking again at something that would be more acceptable to the neighbours, and that would be my recommendation to them. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but well, I guess I am. But that'd be my recommendation to them. So I again would recommend the committee to refuse this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. It now behoves me to put the recommendation that of the conditions 1 to 5 and informants 1 and 2 permission be granted. Kimberly is going to put up a poll, and could you please vote?
Against?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, the recommendation is not carried. Therefore, we've got to come to an alternative recommendation. Now, I think we can do this in here in the sense that it's against all our planning regulations and SMP 16. Philippa, do you want, have you, or Chris, French, do you have any? Or Zach even? Any suggestions? Well, as an alternative recommendation?
Thank you, Chair. I would say the proposal, by reason of its size and siting, would result in an unacceptable loss of light and overbearing impact to the adjoining property at Highbury. The proposal would therefore conflict with policy TD1 of the Local Plan Part 1 2018, retained policies D1 and D4 of the Waverley Borough Local Plan 2002, the Council's Residential Extensions SPD, policy FMP 16 of the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan, and the requirements of the MPPF. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Coburn.
Well, sorry, Chairman, I really put my hand up because I thought you would want an alternative proposal, not, you know, clarification from the officers. That's really what I put my hand up. But I would just include FMP 1 too, as opposed to just FMP 16, if I've got the chance.
I think we can do that. Yes, Philippa, we can do that, can we?
Yes, Chair, I can do that.
Could you just reiterate what we're going to do that while I put to the vote? Please.
Sorry, would you like me to repeat the?
And I'd like to repeat it with FMP1 in this as well, please.
Yeah, no problem. So the proposal, by reason of its size and siting, would result in an unacceptable loss of light and overbearing impact to the adjoining property at Highbury. The proposal would therefore conflict with policies FMP1 and FMP 16 of the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan, policy TD1 of the Local Plan Part 1 2018, retained policies D1 and D4 of the Waverley Borough Local Plan 2002, the Council's Residential Extensions SPD, and the requirements of the MPPF 2019. Thank you, Chair.
Carol, Councillor Coburn, you've still got your hand up. Is that all down, as it were? Muted.
Sorry, Chairman, that was, I just hadn't taken it down. Sorry, I've now taken it down.
Okay, right. Have we got anybody else? Councillor Hyman?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I wonder whether there would be any benefits in somebody's got some feedback going on, but there's a microphone on, I think, to mute themselves. I wonder whether there would be any benefits for us to state the 45-degree rule and the 3-metre rule, which are matters of fact as opposed to matters of opinion of in respect of policy. Do you know what I mean? It would. I'm wondering whether officers might consider that it would be a stronger argument if we were to have those as facts specifically stated in the reasons for refusal, rather than simply blanket mentioning of the policies. Because they are facts that they do. It is facts that it is not compliant, and anyone can check that for themselves. And there is no matter of opinion in relation to, how overbearing or whatever something might be, and the other issues which I think are more opinion. But I'll take officer advice on that. If we don't need to go into that detail in the refusal, then I wouldn't be fussed. But I thought it might help. Thank you.
Chair, would you like me to come back on that?
Sorry?
Shall I come back on those points?
Okay, Councillor Isherwood.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not sure that I've heard someone propose or indeed second the proposal to refuse, but if Councillor Coburn is proposing refusal, I will second it.
Oh, yes, of course. Yes, thank you very much, actually. Right. Councillor Coburn again.
Oops, I've lost myself now. Thank you, Chairman. No, that's what I was saying the last time I came on, that I was prepared to put forward an alternative proposal if I had a seconder. But you'd already gone to the office there to get the whole proposal. So we did it in a slightly different order from how we usually do it. That was all. I mean, having rejected the original proposal, we usually have another proposal. I mean, I'm quite happy to make a proposal for refusal, and if Councillor Ishwood would second me, then we can move straight to the vote, presumably.
I will second.
Right, okay. Well, have we got a poll for this or not?
So there's the alternative recommendation, which is to refuse planning permission on the grounds set out by Philippa.
Sorry, can you repeat that? What are we voting on again? Sorry, say that again. We're voting to
recommendation to the proposal to refuse planning permission on the for the reasons that Philippa read out.
Okay.
Can I say yes?
Yeah, that's noted, Councillor Keane. So I share the results. That's unanimous in favour of refusing permission.
Okay, thank you very much. We can move on to the second item on our agenda tonight, which is an application which is not subject to public speaking. This is WA 2019-2097 land at Riverside 3 car park. An application under Regulation 3 for the retention and permanent use of the Riverside 3 car park. This application is accompanied by an environmental statement. Further information as an addendum to the EIA provided 27th of May 2020. And who's still here to present this case, please?
Good evening, members, and thank you, Chair. I'll just try and share my screen with you. Bear with me a tick, and I'll. So as the Chair has said, this application is for the permanent retention of Riverside 3 car park, and the application is accompanied by an environmental statement. Isn't it? Apologies, apparently my screen's not being shared at the moment. We'll just try and sort that out. Right, apologies. This is my first virtual committee. So, yeah, so the application is for the permanent retention of the existing Riverside 3 car park, and the application is accompanied by an environmental statement and its associated addendum. Before I take you through the details of the planning application, I just want to draw your attention to an update sheet that has been circulated. And really that was provided in order to give a sort of a concise outline of the conclusions of the environmental impact assessment in terms of the significance of the impacts, and also just to clarify a couple of points in relation to noise and vibration. I also have a verbal update which would involve the amendment to condition 3 of the report. And condition 3 currently requires the development to be carried out in accordance with a flood risk management plan to more appropriately satisfy the requirements in the flood risk assessment. I'm suggesting that we reword that condition, and that would be as follows. Within 3 months of the date of this plan permission, a flood risk management plan shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. The development shall be carried out in complete accordance with the approved flood risk management plan. And the reason would be in the interest of flood risk and public safety in accordance with policy CC4 of the local plan part 1, 2018. So if I now take you through the proposal in detail. So this is Riverside 3 car park, outlined in red here, and with its approach along Mike Hawthorne Drive. And just to get your bearings a bit more, this is the Riverway running along here, and the A31 runs along here. So this is an aerial of the site. So where you see these sort of white rectangles, which are car parking spaces, that is the car parking in question. This car park here is Riverside 2, which has permanent planning permission. You can see some industrial units here to the north of the site, and the tennis courts and the pavilion over in this location here. So this just really puts the site into the wider context of Farnham. So this is the leisure centre here. This is the East Street redevelopment scheme here, and Warmead is located just here, and the site is just outside the town centre boundary. So I've got some photos of the site to show you. And this photo is looking from the west to the east. So the tennis courts that we saw earlier are just over here. And this is part of the industrial estate here. This is looking from the east to the west. And this is Riverside Court sheltered housing accommodation. And you can see permanent Riverside 2 car park just in front of that. This is looking sort of from over towards the east of the site towards the tennis courts. This is basically looking south towards the River Wey. So this is a photo taken along the approach to Mike Hawthorne Drive here, and this is, we saw in a previous photograph, we saw Riverside court sheltered housing, and this is the side elevation of that. And this is a view looking north. And again, you see parts of the industrial estate in the background. So this is the layout plan. The car park essentially has 200 spaces laid out with the associated sort of paraphernalia like ticket machines, lighting, etc. And then there is an area of landscape buffer between the car park and the River Wey. So if I take you through the planning history to the site, so temporary planning permission was granted in 2014 for the provision of the car park, and the car park was needed to make up for the lot of Dogflood Way car park whilst the East Street redevelopment scheme was being undertaken. And then once the East Street redevelopment scheme is completed, that in itself has a car park, and therefore you're sort of at a net equivalent as to where you were. So that was the reason for the temporary permission in 2014. Condition 6 of that permission requires that the car park be removed and the land restored or landscaped within 6 months of the car park in the Brightwells, or otherwise known as East Street redevelopment scheme, being completed, or within 5 years of the date of the decision, whichever is the sooner. So there have been various delays to the East Street redevelopment scheme, which means that, as I'm sure lots of you are aware, it's still under construction, but the 5 years under the terms of condition 6 has expired, and that expired in November 2019. So currently we're in a position where the car park no longer has the benefit of planning permission. The applicant is the council, and they have submitted some rationale behind the desire to have the car park made permanent, and that rationale includes providing a long stay offering to Farnham Town Centre's users, supporting a park and stride initiative that the Farnham Town Council in association with Waverley Borough Council and Surrey County Council are hoping to bring forward. Supports for potential plans for pedestrianisation of the centre of Farnham, and overall it would also assist in the delivery of the council's car parking strategy and to try and encourage people to park on the edge of Farnham Town Centre so that they have less need to go through it, thereby easing congestion and hopefully improving air quality. So, as already stated, the application is accompanied by an environmental statement and an addendum which covers the following topics. So that is highways impacts, noise and vibration impacts, and air quality. And they were when a 2014 application was considered, that was also considered to be EIA development, and they were topics that the 2014 application also considered. The environmental statement does include other documents as appendices, such as a flood risk assessment and a biodiversity report, and various other reports are included. But for the purposes of the actual EIA scoping, it is highways, noise and vibration, and air quality that is under consideration. So the environmental statement addendum has been subject to close scrutiny by the Surrey County Council EIA officer, who's an expert in these areas, and she has confirmed that the environmental statement coupled with the addendum is of sufficient standard for us to be able to gain an understanding of the environmental effects of the scheme. So the officer is not making a judgment on whether the proposal is acceptable or not. That is something that is down to this committee. She is purely advising that there's enough information within the documentation for us to be able to make a judgment on the proposal. So just going through, I've tried to separate out in this slide what are EIA considerations and what are non-EIA considerations. So as stated, highways is an EIA consideration. The environmental statement was accompanied to inform what the impacts would be of the development in EIA terms, a transport assessment, which provides as appendices, and resulting from that transport assessment and giving it consideration, the highways impact were considered to be negligible. With regard to noise and vibration, the short-term effects of the proposal are considered to be significant, where the long-term effects are considered to be, so they're considered to be major adverse, apologies, and the short-term effects, the long-term effects considered to be minor, moderate adverse. We have taken extensive advice off the council's noise officer, who, taking into account various considerations that are outlined in the officer's report, is satisfied that actually there wouldn't be any significant harm resulting from the proposal with regard to noise. And in terms of air quality, again, the environmental statement concludes that there would be negligible impact on air quality, and the council's air quality officer has scrutinised it and has raised no objection, subject to a condition in relation to vehicle charging points, which is set out in the officer's report. Bear with me, sorry, I've got a very dry mouth. So taking, I think, key considerations from the non-EIA list. In terms of flood risk, it is acknowledged in the officer's report that the site is in flood risk zone 3B, where the guidance does, that's the highest flood zone level, and the government guidance does indicate that less vulnerable development, which this is categorised as, shouldn't be allowed in this location. But we do have comments from both the Environment Agency and the SUDS officer of Surrey County Council, neither of whom have objected, and for various other reasons outlined in the officer's report on the flood risk section. We think in this instance the proposed development is acceptable. And I'll just point you towards one of the conditions which relates to the provision of a flood risk management plan, which I mentioned in my verbal update. In terms of biodiversity, lots of biodiversity measures were required under the 2014 permission, and they have been undertaken, and Surrey Wildlife Trust raised no objection, subject to ensuring that any sort of future provision of lighting has regard to biodiversity implications, and also the requirement for a landscape ecological management plan for the site. And finally, I think it would just be good to touch on climate change and sustainability, because I think there is a recognition that once the East Street redevelopment scheme gets up and running, effectively, if this application were to be approved, it would result in a net increase in permanent car parks within Farnham. However, the rationale for putting forward the proposal is based on sort of climate change and sustainability grounds, because it's by having a car park on the periphery of the town centre, which hopefully reduces the length of people's trips because they don't have to go into the town centre, eases congestion in the town centre, and thereby potentially assists in air quality. So officers are satisfied that it does achieve those objectives, and on that basis officers are recommending approval of the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillors, Councillor Coburn, listen to this.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, to me, this is an absolute no-brainer. And I know, we have the argument the whole time, don't have car parks, everyone will walk or cycle, and it's absolute rubbish. We're putting up so many houses in the Farnham area. We're going to need every bit of parking we can get. This has been a great success, much to a lot of our surprises. I think the Town Council have hit the nail on the head. It's one thing to renew the permission, and I think that's absolutely fine, but there's a lot more consideration I hope is going to be given to this site. Were we to need another story, it does flood. I mean, anything near the river in Farnham floods, so at some point it'll be underwater. And if you were looking to put another deck on somewhere, this is the obvious site to do it, because it doesn't really affect too many people at all. And there should be more connectivity between it and the industrial estate. It's easy enough to do. There's a fair bit of traffic going along my Cawthorne Drive now, and we do have elderly residents living in there. So anything we could do to just slightly lessen the traffic actually along outside their bedroom windows. So I don't think there's any reason at all not to extend the permission to keep the car parking, but I hope we would be a little more imaginative later on as to how this is used in terms of the whole development of the town, and in particular that area. It's all so unknown at the moment. But I'm really getting a little bit frightened of this idea that we're all going to be forced onto bikes, because I really can't see it happening. But I have to be honest and say park and stride just makes me smile too, because is that not what you do when you park a car in a car park? I've missed the point here. You park the car and you walk, but maybe somebody enlighten me as to why you stride from this car park as opposed to walk. But basically, it's a good place for a car park. We need the car parking. I think we need an extra layer at some point, and I certainly think we need better connectivity than always using my car Hawthorne Drive. But apart from that, I can't see there's an issue with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Edmonds, followed by Councillor Hyman. Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you very much, Chair. I very much would welcome additional parking in Farnham. Every time I go to Farnham, I seem to have a problem parking. However, I do have a current understanding that I need to clarify. The first is, my understanding is that we have no authority to approve the application unless a valid environmental impact assessment has been completed. The second thing I need to confirm is that the environmental impact assessment public notification and consultation has taken place. That is a statutory requirement which is required for the EIA. I couldn't find sufficient evidence that that had taken place. I also was unable to obtain a copy of the non-technical summary or the EIA on our Waverley Borough Council website. When I looked further, I found that we imposed a charge of £250 for a hard copy of the EIA. That discourages public consultation. Who's going to pay £250 for a hard copy? And the final point I would make is, under the Environmental Impact Assessment Regulations 2017, paragraph 64, objectivity and bias, where an authority has a duty under these regulations, they must perform the duty in an objective manner, so as not to find themselves in a situation that gives rise to a conflict of interest. We are judging our own cause. I really need to make sure that we've carried out the statutory obligations for public consultation for the environmental impact assessment. Thank you.
Ruth, do you want to answer those questions?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We as officers have given this just the normal scrutiny in response to your question about objectivity. We have given this the absolutely the same level of scrutiny that we would give any other planning application. Indeed, when the environmental impact assessment was first submitted, we said it wasn't good enough, and we went back, and hence we received the addendum, which actually takes the baseline scenarios, having no car park there, in recognition of the fact that the planning permission had expired. So in those respects, I think we've been very robust. We've also consulted externally on this, Surrey County Highway Authority and the expert at the County Authority on environmental impact assessments. And she, so I think you're aware of, Councillor Edmonds, she sent back a very detailed response setting out why she felt that the contents of the environmental impact assessment were sufficient to be put forward for our consideration. And obviously, within the bounds of what is possible for us to do, we've consulted internally in terms of air quality and noise, etc. And I have also had, lots of discussions with these officers about various aspects of it. So I very much am satisfied that it's been dealt with in an objective fashion. In terms of, and actually I think I might just move on to say that obviously in the officer's report we have made judgments about various matters, and I think there is quite a lot of detail in there as to why we've made those judgments and why we think it's acceptable, and that is the approach that we would take with anyone. In terms of the publicity, we're satisfied that that was undertaken correctly. When the application was originally submitted, I personally put up 4 site notices around the site with all the required writing that needs to go on them. They need very specific, it needs to say very specific stuff. And then 4 site notices also went up once the addendum was received, and it was very clear that people had their 30 days in which to comment. We've done 2 rounds of consultation in the newspaper, one when the original EIA came in, one when the addendum came in, and we've also consulted neighbouring residents both originally and of the EIA addendum. So we are satisfied that all the publicity that we are required to do under the EIA regs has been undertaken, and hopefully that has responded to all your points. Thank you, Chair.
I'll let you come back, Councillor Edmonds, because I see you put your hand up if you want to finish this particular aspect of the thing.
You're muted, Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased that we have published this in the newspaper, as we had a statutory obligation to do. The only key issue that now remains is the availability of the non-technical summary and the access to the EIA.
Yeah, well, 2 more speakers at the moment. Councillor Hyman, followed by Councillor Martin. Councillor Hyman.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Well, I can answer the question there from Councillor Edmonds. He's absolutely correct that this hinges on the EIA regulations 2017. Consultation has occurred correctly, as Ruth says, and the non-technical summary and the EIR or environmental statement as presented are on the website. So I read them again last night. But the issue here is that a screening direction was issued, which Waverley chose to ignore back in 2014, after I'd questioned Waverley's attempts to go back to their long-standing position of that this doesn't need EIA. I'd fought that in the CPO inquiry for 3 weeks and was proven correct when Waverley admitted they did. Asked Crest Nicholson to produce an EIA. Crest refused because of the contamination and flood risk on this site, because it's the old gasworks site part of it. And of course then eventually it was constructed without planning permission. No planning consent in place now. It's being used without planning consent. Nevertheless, I can't in all good conscience recommend that anyone grants consent for this because the environmental statement is incomplete. The EIA process hasn't been carried out properly. It never has over 15 years. The issue here is Steeples says that we shouldn't just be careful about this. We should be particularly scrupulous because it's a Regulation 3 application on our own, for ourselves, asking consent of ourselves. We have to be particularly scrupulous. The screening direction made it, from the Secretary of State, made it perfectly clear we must have an environmental statement, EIA, for the entirety of the project, for the whole of the Riverside East Street development. That's their words, and I can put it up on the screen if you want. But that screening direction should be on amongst the application documents. It is not. We should refuse permission on those grounds. But the main reason is there are numerous issues which very simply prove that this development does not have a complete and up-to-date environmental statement as required, so we must refuse consent. However much we'd like to have extra charging points and however much we think, well, it's better to have some additional car parking, even if no one wants to use it. I mean, the documents say no more than 25, 30 people have been on that site at any one time. We parked there in the 198 spaces. People don't want to park there. We don't need it all. The default position, Chairman, is that this is reinstated. And even though Surrey County Council's EIA expert did say that they objected and said, hey, you've got to put in the alternative scenario and assess the alternative scenario that we stick with our default situation. That hasn't been done properly because no car park is not the same as restoration and putting trees back on the site, restoring it as it should be. But the questions which prove that the cumulative effects have not been considered for the entire site are, do we have EIA for the other areas of the Riverside site other than this, just the car park area? The answer is no, we don't. Never has been. A hole in the EIA. We can't assess cumulative impact. Another question, where can members of the public find an assessment of the loss of trees across the project? Well, if we should partially restore this, we want to know about how many trees we've lost. Do we need them? Yes, of course we do. Hundreds and hundreds, but you can't find that anywhere in any of the EIA. Another question, do we have an application for the design of the multi-storey car park and leisure centre access, showing the land raising necessary for the other part of this scheme, the Brightwell scheme that hasn't been designed yet? No, we don't. So we cannot assess the flood risk. The flood risk assessment for this isn't in the environmental statement. Neither is the contamination from the gasworks, is not in any environmental statement. And obviously big holes like that, it's so obvious to anybody that this application does not have a complete EIA. It's always been avoided. This is our one opportunity to turn around. Don't forget, this is the car park that was built without planning consent and was covered up with 2 inches of soil on top of an impermeable barrier and then scraped off after consent was granted after a year of denials that they'd built the car park unlawfully. And that's us, the council, doing it. And this is our one opportunity to turn around and say, no, we're doing things properly. We're doing the right thing, as our mayor said we should do. If we refuse this because there is not a complete environmental statement, there are so many issues with this, but it's very simple. We do not have an environmental statement, and Councillor Edmonds is correct, but for the wrong reasons. And Councillor Coburn is correct. This is very simple. Yet the law does not allow us to lawfully grant consent to this application. Let's not keep repeating the mistakes and the scandals of the past, Chairman. So I will be voting against this because I have no option. I know what the law says. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Martin.
Well, after all that, I welcome parking. It allows employees within Farnham Town access to cheaper car parking and opens up the central car parks to visitors and shoppers, which Farnham and its High Street badly needs. I would also be happier for extra signage to advertise it so people actually know where it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, okay, thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I must say I enjoyed my trip down memory lane with Councillor Hyman. I'm not suggesting for a moment that EIAs are not important, but is this a car park we want? The answer is yes. Is it a car park we need? The answer is yes. Is it a car park on the outskirts of town? The answer is yes. Is it going to be good because it's lower prices for commuters? The answer is yes. And I think that was 5 yeses. I wasn't counting, but I certainly will be supporting this.
Okay. Thank you very much. We've got no further hands. So I think, could Ruth, you read out the revised condition 3 you mentioned before? Everybody's quite
yes.
clear on what you're proposing.
Okay, so currently condition 3, because the car park is already subject to a flood risk management plan, and condition 3, as on your reports, says that the use should continue in accordance with that flood risk management plan. But actually, it would be more robust if we did a review of that flood risk management plan. And so the condition would read, within 3 months of the date of this planning permission, a flood risk management plan shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. The development shall be carried out in complete accordance with the approved flood risk management plan.
Okay.
Do you need the reason as well?
Just a condition, isn't it? I think actually, but do I have anything else, Ruth, or not? I don't think necessarily. Oops,
No.
Okay, let's subject that. I'll put the condition now. That's subject to conditions 1 to 5, including the revised condition 3, as explained by Ruth. And informative on permission be granted. Kimberly, could you please display the poll, please?
Yes, Councillor Keane said yes.
Thank you, Councillor Keane. Is there one more person who hasn't voted?
I haven't got a vote thing up on my screen.
Right.
But count me against if you want to add those in there. I can't.
You're against. Okay, thank you, Councillor Hyman. In that case, that is 12 in favour of granting and 2 against.
Okay, then it is carried. The application is granted. Thank you very much, everybody. Right, I think there being no business that's subject to exclusion of press and public, that brings us to the end of this meeting. But I would like to advise you that the next meeting could be quite long. Actually, I think we've got 5 items on the agenda, I think, for next meeting. Chris, isn't it? Chris French?
Yes. Yep.
So we will try and get through the public speaking ones, certainly, but we may have to carry the non-speaking ones over to the next meeting. Okay. Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, officers.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you.